fix this. Show my frame. Okay, what is going on, everybody? Harry here from Pharmaquatics. Here you'll get tips, reviews, research-based best practices for all of you casual keepers out there. I know it has been a while since I uploaded a video. Let's just say work got a little crazy, but I've been getting a lot of questions about how my maintenance schedule looks like with the Marineland 5-gallon tank. So I figured I would do a video. The maintenance, how often I do it, what do I do, what is my workflow, things like that. So let's just dive into it. First, let's go over all of the supplies that I use to clean the 5-gallon portrait tank. Nothing in this list will be groundbreaking. It'll be your cookie cutter supplies that people use for all of their tank maintenance, but I will list everything down below in the description. I use Chem Prime as my dechlorinator, and I like Chem Prime over other dechlorinators because it accomplishes other things such as detoxifying your ammonia, your nitrates, and your nitrites. In order to siphon out my water, I use a gravel vacuum, and it comes with different size attachments, which you'll see will come in handy specifically for the 5-gallon portrait tank. Next up, I use quilt batting, and for those of you who have been on my channel for a while, you know that I talk about this a lot. Quilt batting is a great, cheaper alternative for water floss, and it does a great job in polishing your water. Next up are the buckets. I actually use 2 buckets, and the reason for that is because I don't like to use the same bucket for my dirty water as the bucket I use for my clean water. Next up is the algae scraper, and it's actually right there on the glass as we speak, and that is the MagnaFloat aquarium glass scraper. It's really convenient because you never have to take it off of your tank, and I could just basically erase the algae off of the walls. So that is the list of supplies. Again, they will all be linked down in the description. If you want to support the channel, use those links. So let's move on to how often I clean my tank. For me personally, I have 2 workflows. I do a water change as well as a deep cleaning. For the water changes, I do about a 20 to 50% water change every 2 weeks. And then for the deep cleaning maintenance, I do that on a monthly basis. I will say, however, maintenance schedule should vary on a case-by-case basis because there are a lot of factors that you have to consider. First factor is the size of the tank. In our case, we are doing a 5-gallon portrait tank. And since this is on the lower end in terms of size of tanks, it's pretty expected that the frequency of water changes will be higher compared to your 20 gallons or your 30 gallons or any other tanks that are much higher. Next up would be how stocked is your tank. Generally, if your tank is overstocked, that might mean you may have to do more maintenance than usual compared to a tank that is understocked. If you overfeed your fish a lot, there may be a lot of uneaten food that collects on the bottom, which may lend itself to you having to do more maintenance. Fourth factor would have to be your filter. If you have a hang-on back filter, or any other filter for that matter that requires the use of a motor, you want to make sure that the suction is not impeded by debris, detritus, uneaten food. So take a look at your intake's filters and make sure that you're cleaning it often enough so that debris does not collect on it. The reason for this is because if you do collect debris, it's going to make your motor have to work harder than it needs to. That may increase the chance that you may burn out the power head that's in your filter. The last factor to consider would be personal preference. I know a lot of hobbyists like to keep all the mulm that builds up in their tanks. They like to keep the dirt in there, and they only really just do water changes, not that much gravel vacuuming. And from what I've seen, the hobbyists that do end up going this route have been just fine. Some of them are actually breeders and have had no trouble in allowing that mulm to build up in their breeder tanks. For me personally, I like a clean tank, free of debris, free of detritus, so I like to go the route where I gravel vacuum anything that collects on the bottom. Taking all these factors into consideration, it may be difficult for you to ultimately decide how often should you water change your tanks. Girl Talks Fish actually did a great video on some of the ways that you can figure out how often you should water change your specific tank, and this consists of multiple tests and figuring out your ammonia levels and your water parameters to see if you need to water change your tank weekly, bi-weekly, every other week, and so on and so forth. So I'll link that video down in the description, and if you do go into that video, let her know I sent you. So now that we have established how often I do my water changes, let's move on to the actual process of these 2 workflows. Also, as a side note, I know that it is recommended that you take out your fish, whether it's your betta fish or whatever you stock your tanks with, out of the tank as you do your maintenance, but I personally have not done that. I know it's ideal, but my fish have been fine, and It really is up to you. So in terms of the water changes, those are pretty self-explanatory. Again, I do 20 to 50% water changes whenever I do them. So basically you siphon out 20 to 50% of the water within the tank into one bucket and you replace the water that you suctioned out with dechlorinated water. Some little tips I have for water changes: make sure the temperature of the new water that you're replacing your old water is as close to the overall tank's temperature. I know it's hard, but really try your best to do that, because if they are dramatically different, this can potentially stress out your fish. And I personally wouldn't go further than a 50% water change, especially given the fact that we are in a 5-gallon tank, because this can drastically change the water parameters within your tank and can potentially crash your nitrogen cycle. So now let's move on to the monthly deep cleaning that I do. There is going to be some logic to how I do my monthly cleaning, so make sure you follow the steps in the way that I listed out. First thing I like to do is scrub the algae off of the glass walls with the scraper that I talked about earlier. The reason I have this as my first step is so that when we hit our next step, which is gravel vacuuming the actual tank, I can simultaneously suction some of the algae that has been dislodged from the walls. So as you're gravel vacuuming the front portion of your tank, make sure that you also gravel vacuum the back portion where the filter is located at, because debris can still collect back there. And for this, it's really helpful to have an attachment that can physically fit back there, because some siphons may actually be too big. So now that you have all that dirty water in a bucket, we can now do our third step. So the third step is to dislodge all of the gunk and the really big debris that has collected on your filter compartments. So take your tube, your sponge, as well as your filter media, take them out of the tank and put them into your dirty water. And in that dirty water, you basically want to dislodge anything that has collected on those 3 items. So what I like to do, for example, with the sponge is to just squeeze it a couple times in that dirty water. You'd be surprised how much dirt is actually collected in that sponge when you squeeze it within that old tank water. And don't worry about this potentially harming your colony of bacteria that's collected on the sponge as well as the media. As long as you're keeping it in that old tank water, it should be fine. 2 things that I wouldn't do, however, is make sure that you don't keep your filter media out of water for too long, because that could potentially affect the bacteria. Another thing you don't want to do is clean those filter items within chlorinated water. So once that is all set, step 4 would be to replace the water floss that I use for my filter. Out of the box, the 5-gallon Marineland tank doesn't actually have water floss within its filtration system. This is actually one of the modifications that I used for this specific tank. I'll link down below the video and also put it up here of the 10 modifications that I have specific to this tank. One tip regarding this is that some people will recommend that you actually get pillow fill. I personally prefer quilt batting. They're both made of the same material, they're both polyester. I like quilt batting over pillow fill because they come in these sheet forms, and that makes it a lot easier for you to cut them into the different shapes and sizes that you need. So once that is all done, put all of your filtration components back to where they were within the tank and fill up your tank with dechlorinated water. And that is basically it. It doesn't get any more simple than that. If I brought any value to you in this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I want to assure you that a lot of planning is within the works, especially for you beta keepers. A lot of content is coming your way. I'll also have an article down below which will basically state what I said in this video in writing. Anyways, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.